Easy money, Jay Money.
Let's do this.
I don't know if they're ready for all that. Like, you and I have a history.
I know. Hey everyone, welcome to my podcast called On the House. Today we have a very special guest with us, Marc Montoya, who's the head coach and owner of FactoryX MMA. Marc's someone that I really respect as a mentor and father figure in a lot of our lives. And thanks for coming on today.
Hey man, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love the new facility. It's amazing. You got a lot of cool stuff going on right now. Obviously, you and I have had such a rich history of just a lot of success together, and we've had such an amazing time with our athletes. We've traveled the world together. So yeah, man, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
No. Thank you for making the time on a Sunday.
Of course. You got the stay over.
Yes, for Contenders Tuesday. I know we were talking about it earlier, but I just kind of want to continue that conversation on just kind of that entrepreneur side of starting the gym and kind of how that went, from going from being in the business world, what made you kind of segue over into being a gym owner and a coach, and kind of how you became a coach in itself as well.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a long journey to get to FactoryX. I mean, the biggest thing is, as a kid, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Came from both my parents were teenagers when they had me. Grew up with my grandmother's house, so those kind of things. That I think some of that paves my path, because I grew up in a rough area, and there you're around rough people, and so fighting is something that was of the norm, whether it was my family internally fighting, like full on fighting, or you're just fighting with the neighbor kids. And so fighting is something I feel like has just been in my blood. I mean, even before I was born. I mean, my father is 40% Native American. And when you go look at our history, my family homesteaded in 1850 in southern Colorado. Wow. I'm fourth generation Coloradan. And when you go look at that history, there's just a ton of fighters that have come up through all that, from our native roots and our Hispanic roots. That southern Colorado area, is known for coal mining. So you got a lot of rough just edges there, and a lot of good people. But the point is, I just feel like it was in my blood before I was even born. And so, growing up where I did was I would say is the genesis of the whole thing. But I wrestled and boxed as a kid. I mean, that was something, it's funny, when I started boxing, I asked my mom, I said, "Hey mom, I want to box?" And my mom was like, "Hell no, you're not boxing." And I was always a team sport guy. Like,
what age is this that you were asking your mom for this?
When I was 10, 11, somewhere around there. Wow. So, and I've always played team sports. I played all kinds of team sports. I was always a good athlete. I played baseball and football and basketball and soccer. I played everything, but I really had a love for like football and baseball. And so, I was good at them. And so, but I also wanted to box, because I was like, man, I love boxing. And boxing back in the day, if you think about it, I'm a spring chicken, but I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean? So boxing back then was something that was like MMA today, where
it's in its heyday.
Yeah, it was in its heyday. And so I remember watching Sugar Ray Leonard come on at ABC Sports on Saturday afternoons, and that's when you'd watch boxing, and I'd be glued to the TV watching that, And I remember when my dad would be around, we had one pair of boxing gloves, super cheap boxing gloves, and he'd put socks on my hands, and he'd put gloves on his hands, and then he'd get on his knees and we'd box in the living room, And so that was my introduction into that, and I always wanted to box. And so when I told my mom, I said, "Mom, I want to box," she's like, "You're not doing that." And so, the old saying, it's better to ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Yes.
What I did is I told my mom I was playing basketball, and so a buddy of mine who his name's Antonio Sandoval, he and I. He was able to box. His mom was like, okay. But that's how I got the introduction to boxing. But what we do is I would pretend I was going to basketball practice, and we would run the railroad tracks in Denver all the way from Federal and Alameda area to 6th and Inca, which, if you're not familiar with Denver, that's a good like 7-mile jaunt. And so we'd run the railroad tracks down. I'd go to the boxing gym. It was called St. Joe's. It was in the basement of this Catholic church, and so dingy, like, imagine the Rocky movies, like those dingy old gyms. That's exactly what it was, and super hood, like neighborhood, and actually a rival gang from where I was living was there. So it was kind of sketch anyway.
Yeah.
And so we would run and do that, and sometimes I get a black eye, bloody nose, whatever from boxing. And my mom would be like, "What happened to you?" And I'd say I caught an elbow, like in basketball, getting a rebound or something. And it was all working out fine for a minute. And my little pea brain though didn't think about the fact that when my coach was like, "Hey, we want you to do a boxing match," and I'm super young, I'm a minor, I can't get anywhere, of course, and I need permission from my parents. He's like, "Hey, here's a permission slip for you to box in this next match coming up. We need your parent to sign it, and you're going to need to get there." And it dawned on me, I was like, "Oh shit, I'm going to go have to ask for forgiveness now," and go say, "I haven't been playing basketball. I've actually been boxing, and my mom's going to kill me." And so I remember I went and talked to her. I said, "Hey, Mom, I need you to sign this permission slip for this boxing match. I have a boxing match coming up." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I have this boxing match coming up." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And then I told her the story. She was super pissed at me, like so mad. She was like furious, slapping my ass, pissed. And I was like, "I just want to do this. Like, just, she told me, she goes, "Okay, you can do this." She goes, "If you lose, you're done." And I was like, "Okay, fine, done." And so luckily I went and won. And that's kind of where that started for me. But like I said earlier, I was really good at team sports. And so I would box and I would wrestle, like in the season. And then I would play football and baseball. And when my parents got divorced, it was the summer going into high school. My dad moved out from Denver to Littleton, and the boxing gym was super far from there. I couldn't drive yet. So I actually stopped boxing at that point and just honed in solely on baseball and football. And I played that through high school, played college baseball. And when I got done with college baseball, I was telling you earlier, I was like, my buddy said, "Hey, you want to come play a softball game?" And I was thinking, not really. But he's like, "Come try it. It's fun. We have a blast. We do this a couple times a week." I went and played one game, Jay, and I was like, "This sucks. I'm way too competitive for this shit." And I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember I was up late at night. I was a young kid then, so being up late at night was of the norm. And I was up late at night at like 12:30, probably at night. And I remember ESPN2 came on and ISK kickboxing was on, and there was a Muay Thai match that came on. And I'd never seen Muay Thai before. And I watched that fight, and I was like, "Man, that looks so freaking fun." And there was boxing included, and I already had a boxing background. And I was like, "Man, that looks like a blast." And this is how old I am. I went to the Yellow Pages, the phone book, and I opened the phone book, and I looked in my area, and there just so happened to be a Muay Thai gym, and it was called Champions. And I was like, "Damn, that's just up the street from me." And so I remember I had such a restless night that night. Couldn't wait to wake up to call and be like, "Hey, is this really do you guys really teach Muay Thai?" And all this stuff. And so it just so happened that at the time they did. They taught, they were way ahead of their time. In 1998 is when this happened. This is after college. This is me, making my way into sales and start. I had a job, of course. But when I went over there, I was like, "Holy crap!" I walked in, and they had a big mat space. They had a boxing ring, and they had a cage. And I'd never seen a cage before. I was like,
So
"Wow,
they're really advanced at 98 then to have all that.
crazy advanced."
That's like what, year 5 of UFC?
5, yeah.
Wow. So they were really progressive at that point.
Right. And my uncle, one of my like I have my dad's family is huge. So I have 7 uncles and an aunt, and all my uncles are crazy. But one of my uncles, who's super young, because my parents are so young, he and I are kind of like brothers. He would come over with VHS tapes and show me. He's like, you see this this UFC stuff? And I was like, no, what the hell is it? And he's actually the one that showed me my first ever UFC fight. And that was, they were pre-recorded, and then you would see them later. Yeah. And so we watched it on VHS, and I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. I was like in love with it. And so when I found Champions, it just so happened that, Dwayne Ludwig and Oscar Martinez actually coaches Drew Dober.
Yeah.
Consistently, and Oscar, but those 2 guys were at that gym and training. And at the time, they weren't who they are today. Yeah. And neither was I, of course. But they were training there, and they've had a couple years-ish, maybe more than that, but they had a couple years of training. There was Brad Gum, who was there. He fought in the UFC. He fought Shoney Carter, actually, in the UFC. I was his main training partner for that fight, actually.
Wow.
But Dave Ruiz was was the first black belt in Colorado. He came from the Machado brothers from California. And so you had this little nucleus of guys that had no idea what they were at the time. And we were just all training together. We didn't really have a coach per se. Dwayne and Oscar and Dave, of course, were our coaches, but we were all very similar ages, and we just...
Because Dwayne was still fighting at that time, right?
He was full entrenched into fighting.
Was Oscar, did he fight? I'm not sure.
He fought Muay Thai.
Okay.
And then Brad Gum fought, at the time, Vale Tudo.
Yeah.
And then, of course, MMA. And so, and then Dave Ruiz was a black belt. And if you think about a black belt in 98, that's rare.
Yeah.
At least in Colorado, we didn't have one.
That's rare in the States, I think, at that point.
Yeah. So I always say to the fighters that I train that sometimes you think you found fighting. I disagree. I think fighting found us. And so, and that, I think that's a good example of fighting found me. And, that's kind of the genesis of how that all started. I started training in Muay Thai, and then, of course, transitioned into what was Vale Tudo MMA.
At this point, when you go to Champions, are you training with the black belt as well, or you're just kind of focusing on the stand-up at that point?
A little of both. Okay. So, but more the striking, because that was always my first love. Yeah. Like the boxing was always my first love, and I really resonated toward the striking area. And you had Dwayne Ludwig and Oscar Martinez in there,
great coaches,
who were fully entrenched in doing it and were willing to teach me, and so that was my start of that, and that's where I got that whole start of, man, I love to do this, and the one softball game thing was massive history.
So you were like working during the day and then going to train at night at Champions.
Yeah,
and kind of be the schedule.
And the funniest part is we started in the winter of 98. And the first day, I remember I called. The first day I called and I said, hey, do you guys have these classes and whatever? And the guy that owned the place at the time, his name was Bing Tran, and a Vietnamese guy. And so he says, yes, Marc, you come in, you sign waiver, and you do class. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I talked my brother and my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, into coming with me. I was like, you guys should come with me. This is what this thing is. I saw this on TV. You guys are going to love this. When we went in, Oscar Martinez was teaching, and there wasn't a person in the class because it was snowing a blizzard that night. And so no one came that night. And it was just us 3. So it was myself, my brother, and my brother-in-law. And Oscar Martinez, we walked in. You could tell he was probably ready to leave because no one was there. It was snowing crazy. And, and so anyway, he goes, what are you guys doing? And we're like, I say, man, I called and we're interested in training Muay Thai. And he was like, oh, okay. And so Oscar had us, and at the time I didn't know anything. When I think about it now, it's funny, but it's also like, what the hell was that? He had us, without any shin pads, check a low kick on each other. I've never touched another guy's shin to my shin. Oh, God. And we did that for an hour and a half, and my shins were smoked. And I went home, my wife was like, how was it? And I was like, I freaking love it. And I had all these lumps on my shins, and I could barely walk. I was like, dude, and I just loved it. And so She's like, "You're crazy. You love that?" And you anyone that's not done that consistently, it's like when you hit your shin on a bike pedal.
Yeah.
Go do that for an hour and a half straight. I don't know why I love that. I always like to suffer. So anyway, the point is that was my introduction into it, and it was a tough one. And that's essentially how we started. And my brother-in-law and my brother fought a little bit, but my brother's a fireman in Denver, and my brother-in-law is a master electrician. So they had their careers going. I was in sales. I was always been good at sales, but never like fully loved. I mean, I wasn't in love with it. I was doing it because I had a family to support. So that's where I really caught the love of what I was doing, or with mixed martial arts essentially, and that was the genesis for the whole thing right there.
And so you're at Champions. At this time, you're already married to Jara at this point. Okay. And so how long did your brother and brother-in-law stay training? They stayed for quite a while?
They trained a couple years. Yeah, they trained for a couple years. Jara and I were married. We hadn't had kids yet. We were just newly married. Jara didn't have an idea what I was doing. She like every Friday night we would actually fight at Champions, and like full on fight. And people from the street would come in and they would sign a waiver. And Bing Tran would look at him and be like, "Oh, how long you train?" And you'd say a year. He'd be like, "Oh, Mark trained a year. You look similar size." And you could be 20 pounds heavier than me or vice versa. It didn't matter. But and he would say to you, "Do you want to box? Do you want to do Muay Thai? Do you want to do Vale Tudo? What do you want to do?" Because we had a cage and a ring. And and then we would decide, and then we'd go throw down, and that's what we did. And if I wanted to fight 3 times that night, I would do it. And you would get all these different styles and different people in there, and that's what we do. And then Friday night we'd get done, and then we'd go we'd go hang out with our buddies and my wife and their wives or whatever. And my wife really didn't know what I was doing. She was just like, "Man, you're coming home loving it, but you're also sometimes coming home with your like a black eye or whatever's going on, And so she really didn't have an idea what the hell I was doing, and so and I didn't know that wasn't normal. Like that was my first introduction into how this all happened. And so, it just became the norm. Like that's, my team still spars on Friday.
Would you guys have like rounds on those Fridays, or is just like one?
No, we'd have
set time.
We'd have rounds, and guys would get knocked out. Guys would and sometimes they would just be like, "You okay?" And then they'd wake them up, and then sometimes those guys would spar another 2, or fight another match or whatever. And so it was a different deal. It was so wild back then.
Yeah. No, really, the training protocols are obviously a lot different than they were.
Yeah, it was wild. And then we'd spar really hard when people wouldn't come in. We'd on Fridays we would spar like we were fighting every Friday, and so with our teammates, or guys we trained with at the gym, and so. Man, it was a wild deal. And so as I look back at it, when I was in the middle of it, it just felt like this is what you do. This is how the sport is.
And how long were you at Champions for?
So Champions, I was there for a couple years. And there was kind of a split that happened. Dwayne was going one direction. Dave Ruiz was going one direction. And Brad Gum was going in another direction. Okay. And so... there was a split happening, and Bing Tran at the time asked me if I wanted to take over Champions. And you got to remember, I'm a good athlete coming into that. I played college sports. I have some boxing background and some wrestling background, but I don't have a ton of mixed martial arts background. I mean,
so at that point, it's probably 2 years of MMA training for say, right? Jiu-jitsu, like kind of putting it together a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But I way more focused on the striking side, And so 3 months into training there, though, they started asking me if I would teach classes because they had regular classes for kids and adults. Mm-hmm. Would I teach some classes? And I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm 3 months in. I don't know anything. And I was telling you earlier, sometimes people see something in you that you don't see.
Yeah.
And for some reason, whether it was out of just need that they needed maybe another coach, but there was something there that they saw to ask me to coach. And I was really good at it right away. And so at coaching. And so But I never wanted to coach. That was never once my thought. I wanted to fight. That's what I wanted to do. And so coaching, I was doing that only to offset my monthly dues. And so never got paid to coach. And 3 months in, I started coaching, a class or two or whatever, and then just become a regular staple there. And a couple years later, Bing was like, hey, you want to take over champions? And I was like, man, I would love to. And I went to my wife, but the problem is that financially it wasn't going to be. I just wasn't ready yet. The saying, timing's everything.
Yeah.
The timing for me, I felt like the timing was good, but my wife is always right. So she was like, "This is not the right time to do that. You need to focus on."
This is like 2000.
Yep. 2000-ish, 2000, between like 2000, 2001, somewhere around
Right there. Okay.
And so I was pretty devastated because I wanted to do that, and I felt like that was in my heart to do. But I had to put that on the back shelf and just shelf the thing and say, okay, I guess this isn't what God's got planned for me right now. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up following Oscar Martinez and Dave Ruiz.
Okay.
And went and I would go train there and I would help coach, and I did some of that. And then I went and trained and helped Brad Gum after that.
What gym was that? What was that called that you went over there?
So they still have it. It's called Colorado Muay Thai.
Okay.
And Colorado Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
It still exists in Denver. And so but Oscar is the Muay Thai side. And so that's who I went and trained with. And then Brad Gum had Gum MMA. And Brad at the time was fighting. And when that whole split happened, that's when he is actually getting ready to fight Shoney Carter in the UFC. And he and I trained hard together for that fight. And that was my first real, I could touch and feel almost the UFC.
Your first training camp for a big fight like that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is cool, and so, and you got to remember though, still in 2000-ish, it's somewhere around there, that the UFC is not at all what it is right now, so it was still very, it had a lot of rough edges still, and so, but at the time it was crazy cool, and so that was my first, I was close to touching and feeling the UFC. And so when we did that, Brad Gum I went from Oscars and then I went to Brad's and started training and coaching with Brad. He had a fight team at the time, a small one. He had like 4 or 5 guys. And I would go in there and train, and then the guys would ask me, hey, coach, would you train me individually? And I'd never done a ton of individual training. I did some group stuff, and I would train guys, yes, individually here and there, but just adults, but not fighters. And so I was like, yeah, sure, and so I started training some of those guys, and the guys that were there were Chris Camozzi, Chase Hackett,
oh wow,
Jamie Addy, and Tony Miller, and Nick Macias. Those were the 4 or 5 guys that were there.
When you're training them, this is for MMA?
For MMA.
And were there any local shows for them to compete on, or is it still kind of like that Friday night?
No, there was local shows now. So at that point, there
was it Ring
of Fire? Sven had Ring of Fire going on, and then you had a few other local shows that were taking off, and so those guys were fighting locally, and I went and told my wife. I went and told Jared. I said, hey, these guys, a couple of these fighters are asking me to help train them, and she was like, oh, that's cool, and that was kind of the extent of the conversation. And Jamie Addy, who never went past the regional scene, but the reason I bring his name up is because I remember I helped him train for a fight. And I really helped him, in a real camp, helped him and started to put my coach hat on, I helped him get ready for this fight. And Jared and I went to just watch the fight. and we were just in the crowd. We weren't in the corner.
Okay.
And so I helped. Brad Gum was in his corner and the whole thing, and so we went to watch it. And when he won, and when he got done, one of the first things he said is, "I just want to thank Marc Montoya for helping me get ready for this fight." And my wife looked at me and she was like, "You helped him get ready for that?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I was saying. I helped him." And it was kind of an epiphany to her, like, "Huh, maybe there's something there."
Yeah.
And so that's where that like real coaching introduction happened, with those guys, those few guys.
And so at this time, you're still working during the day. You're just meeting up with these guys at night after work and coaching them, or kind of putting together
Training
camps and all this stuff.
I've always been a guy that trains with the guys.
Yeah.
I still do even at my old ass age now, I still train with the guys, like real train with them. And so I was training with them, and then I would spar, and I would grapple, and I would strike, and I would do all the stuff and wrestle with them. And then I would train, like hold pads and do the striking side for them. At the beginning, that's where it all started, was on that end. And so, we started into that, and then Chase Hackett and Chris Camozzi, Tony Miller, Nick Macias, those guys were all that little nucleus of fighters there. And then Chris Camozzi was my first ever UFC fighter. And that's where that all came from, as a coach.
Yeah.
He was the first guy I ever coached.
So I think he was it 2010 he got on The Ultimate Fighter, I believe?
It was 2008, I believe.
8, okay.
Yeah, I think it was 2008.
At this point, are you still training at Denver Muay Thai, or so?
We're at Brad Gums.
You're at Brad Gums at this point. Okay, Brad Gums. Okay, and that's where you were really taking over with Chris's career.
Yep, that's where I was helping, because Brad had a really good. Brad was a black belt at that point, and Brad's wrestling and ground game was obviously super solid, especially back then, for having a black belt that young in the sport. And then my striking background. From my boxing background, and then training through the years up until this point, my striking background, I obviously fought a bunch and coached leading up to 2008.
Yeah,
almost 10 years basically. I coached. I was telling you earlier, I coached for 10 years for no payment.
So for those 10 years, again, you're still just doing this at night.
It's just a hobby.
Just a hobby.
It's fun. It's a hobby because there's no money in it. And it's not that I was training like it was a hobby, because I was training my ass off.
Yeah.
I was working a full-time job. I was in sales. I was working a full-time job. But it was a hobby. There was no money. And so, especially there's no ROI on the investment of time we're putting in.
And Jared was okay with you. I mean, I'm assuming you're doing this 4 or 5 nights a week, right?
I was doing it almost every day in the evening. And so I'd go do my own strength conditioning. My brother-in-law and I would go to our own strength conditioning, and then we'd go to the gym, and we'd train in the evenings. And I would do that every day except for Sunday. And so just as a guy, as a fighter or whatever, coach, whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, for 10 years, I never wanted a dime, to be honest with you. I didn't do it for the money. I still don't. I don't even know what my guys made. Like Alex fought last night. Jay, the only reason I would know what he made last night is because you would tell me. I don't know what he made, or my wife would tell me.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that I'm oblivious to the numbers. It's just that that's not what matters to me.
Yeah.
And so, and it never has. And that's a case in point. I coached guys for 10 years for no cash. I didn't want cash. I just wanted to be. I just love mixed martial arts.
You just want to be involved.
I wanted to help people, of course, and improve my mixed martial arts ability and knowledge and IQ and all those things. And so, for 10 years, that's what I did. And in 2008, I said to my wife, I said, I'm gonna start coaching these guys. They're asking me if I could coach them consistently. And that's when Chris Camozzi went to Tough, and we started. That's when we started our journey. Chris and I had 20 fights in the UFC together, and wow. I don't think people realize that, because he had a pretty long career in the UFC.
Very good career.
And so anyway, but that was my start to my initiation into the UFC was via
So that's
him.
like '08. FactoryX was started in 2010.
10.
So in that 2 year gap is kind of where you decided to go on your own, or
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna finally start getting paid to coach." And it was nothing, let's be honest, but it was something.
Yeah.
And what happened is Brad Gum's gym was starting to collapse, and so I wanted to find a place to train myself, just period me. I wanted to keep training, and I stumbled into this CrossFit gym. It was called CrossFit Littleton, and Ian Starr owned CrossFit Littleton, and I walked in there, and I remember behind his desk, I saw in this like room with this door shut, but it had like windows on the door. I saw mats, and I was like, "What are the mats for?" And because I came in there just to inquire about CrossFit for myself.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, I trained some guys in jiu-jitsu there. I'm a purple belt. And then I was like, "Oh, really? You train? You train?" So we got to talking, and then of course we knew some people, some like people, and I said, "Hey, I train a few guys." And the gym, it's looking like it's going to have to close its doors. And I'm actually looking for a place to train myself, but I'd like to train some guys. Would you be interested in me running like a program out of here? And he was like, "Yeah, I actually would be." And so anyway, we had conversations about that. That's when I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, I might have an opportunity to actually like coach here."
Yeah.
And the champion thing come full circle. Like when I told you earlier, I wanted to run champions, but it just the timing just wasn't the right thing.
Yeah.
And so my wife said to me, and every time I tell this story, I say this, I mean this. She didn't say this to me because she didn't believe in me. She said this to me because at the time, you got to remember my fighting career, whatever you want to call it, hobby, whatever it was, came to an end because my daughter was born 3 months premature, and my daughter and my wife almost died. And it took us 2 years to get Brooklyn out of the woods.
Wow.
And fighting being a hobby, not paying the bills, it had to take a back burner, to get sat on the back burner. And so that whole thing there, when I went and told her, you got to remember all this is kind of going on. And so she's like, "That's great. Don't quit your day job, though." And she meant that in the sense of not that she didn't believe in me. Maybe she didn't fully believe in me, but she meant it like, you're the man of the house, and we have a sick baby, and we have grown-ass man bills here. I know you want to go chase a dream here, but don't lose sight on what's important right now. And so, that was where I started the, like, hey, I'm actually going to get paid and train some guys here. And I brought some guys over there and started a program in that CrossFit Littleton place is where we first started, in this little blue mat space. It was tiny. It was in a strip mall. But it was big enough to do what we needed to do. And the CrossFit gym was right there, so we could do our strength conditioning right there.
Kill two birds with one
stone. Yeah, and Ian was a great guy. He's the one that actually gave me my start. Ian Starr is the guy that gave me my start into actually owning a business and being a real coach. And so that's where that all started. And as personally, we were in the thick of it financially, and with my daughter's health and my wife's health. And so we were in the thick of it. And so, but that's where, when God puts a heart on your vision, God gives you a vision and puts it on your heart, but he doesn't give the other people your same vision. And so, but that's the one that he was giving me. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is going to be tough. And in order to do that, in order to train those guys full time and do this thing full time, I worked 4 years straight in my sales job and I trained guys full time. I did that for 4 years, and I was working 60 plus hours in a sales job. And then I was going and training the guys late at night. And I was getting home at like 11:30 p.m. and I'd start my day at 4:30 in the morning. And I was getting like 4 hours of sleep a day, and I did that for 4 years. And so I know if it means something to you, you'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
But it was freaking killing me. Like but I was young too, and so could I do that today? I was like, man, I don't know if I could. I guess I probably do. I just do it in a different way.
And so how long were you at Ian Starr's gym before going and creating what is now FactoryX?
So we were there from 2008 to 2010, and in 2010 I had this idea. I was like, Ian, what if we took, because we needed more space. The FactoryX side was growing, and his CrossFit side was growing. We needed more space, and I said, and then at the time, Performance MMA was going on. Troy Barron owned Performance MMA, and that was a MMA apparel.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and he had apparel and equipment and all that stuff. Well, he was in Denver, and I remember meeting him throughout this process. So my idea was, if I found a big warehouse, what if we put a 3-headed monster in that warehouse, because none of us can afford that alone, but it all fed off each other. The CrossFit side would feed off the MMA side. The MMA side would feed into the Performance MMA side, the equipment and all the stuff. What if we created a 3-headed monster? And it's a risk. So, going into business with partners is a risk.
Always.
And so I was like, but I didn't care. It was my idea, and I went and found a spot. The spot we're in right now, actually, FactoryX is in now. I went and found that it was a 10,000 square foot spot. And I remember walking into that gym, and I told Gerald when we walked in there, it wasn't a gym, of course.
Yeah.
The Rocky Mountain News used to actually use that spot to run newspaper through there. Okay. And so when we walked in there, I remember telling my wife, one day we will have this whole facility one day, I promise you. And she's looking at me, because you got to remember, we came from like 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
Strip mall.
Yeah.
She's looking at me like, are you fucking crazy? And I'm like, no, I promise you, one day we will have this entire space. But the start of it was a 3-headed monster. So we had CrossFit Littleton in there, we had FactoryX in there, and then we had Performance MMA in there.
And where did the name FactoryX come from?
Yeah, so in the original spot, the little shoebox spot that we were in CrossFit Littleton, in the little blue mat spot, my strength conditioning coach at the time, his name was Chappie. He came in one day, and I used to turn the heat up in there because it was so small and you could just heat that thing up fast. I'd turn the heat up in there, and you would sweat your ass off in there. And he came in one day, like from the CrossFit side, came into the mat side, and he was like, dude, it's like a sweat factory in this place, And I was just searching for a name anyway, because we were getting ready to, form an LLC and the whole thing. And that's where factory came from. And X, and the letter X always has a strong symbol. It's a strong symbol, but there's a lot of X's in mixed martial arts.
Yeah. If
you think about it, whether it's an X guard or you use an X guard in the clinch.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of parallels with an X, and so we ended up naming it FactoryX. That's where it came from, and so it came from the sweat factory that we were building, and that was just because I would crank the heat up, and that's what would happen. But yeah, that was the start of the name there, and the symbol's a strong symbol, and so that's where that all started, and so. Yeah, so we had that 3-headed monster, and it was off to the races, and
because Camozzi was in the UFC at this point.
He was.
I remember Chase Hacker got an opportunity on Tough. I think he fought Chris Saunders on there. Yep. So the guys are really starting to level up and get some pretty big opportunities.
Yeah, we're starting to become more of a name. And, I remember, there's a quote that says, "Work so hard that you don't have to introduce yourself anymore."
Yeah,
I always remember that quote, and I was like. Because I remember we go on the road and people are like, "What gym you from?" And we tell them, we're like, where is that? And, they just didn't know. And, we were proud of it, but nobody knew who the hell we were. Yeah. And so, that was the start of the whole thing. And there was 5 guys that had a lot of confidence in me and probably more confidence than I had in myself. And that's where my coaching journey really started. And then we created a 300 monster, and it gave us the ability to have a large facility
early on.
And I didn't occupy 10,000 square feet yet, but we had a big amount of that space in there. And so the CrossFit side and us had I had about 6,000. They had about 4,000, and then Performance MMA had like 1,000-ish. And so, but we occupy that space, and it was a scary jump.
Yeah,
that's a scary jump.
And at this point, have you quit the day job?
Not yet. And so
how many years into FactoryX before you?
So for 4 years, I worked at a sales job.
2010 to like 2014-ish. Kind of when like the Fox deal happened with UFC's, kind of when.
Right around there.
There.
And I remember going to my wife and I said, hey, babe, I said, if I were to quit, this is 4 years in, okay, and me working my ass off, not complaining, 4 hours of sleep thing, doing the thing. I said, if I were to stop doing my sales job right now, how much are we in the red a month? And she looked at me and she goes, $5,000. I said, wait, $5,000 in the red with what we're already bringing in on the gym side? And she goes, yes. I said, cool, let's do it. And she was like, what, are you fucking crazy? And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, if I go put both feet in, I can feel what's going on. And I believe in myself. Yeah. And I know we can do this thing. If I go put both feet in, I promise you this thing will take off. And, women need comfort. They need stability. None of this is any of that. I'm not giving her any of this. I'm just saying, trust me, believe in me. I've never steered her wrong. So, my wife and I have been together for 25 years. So I've never steered her wrong, but it's also been a wild ride for her too, because I'm kind of a savage that way. And she, she's, I'm not going to settle, I guess, is the deal. Yeah. And so, and I couldn't do it anymore. That was the other thing, is I could, but I didn't want to do it anymore. Yeah. It was killing me.
There's only so long you can run that type of pace at 4 hours of sleep before it starts having diminishing returns on it.
Yes. And it was crushing me, like just physically. And I was young, so that was good too. But and then I jumped both feet in and it took off.
And how long too started you made up that $5,000 a month on the gym side?
A couple months.
Wow.
I just went and hustled.
Just grew the classes, I'm assuming grew on the public side, right? That's where
I went and grew the public side. I was coaching every class pretty much at the beginning.
Probably doing more classes now that you're not working during the day,
more classes, right? Added classes. It only took a couple months, and we just took off. And then the fighter side started growing. The success on the fighter side started growing. I wasn't working less. Here's the thing, is I wasn't working less. I was actually working probably more.
You're doing what you love.
But I was doing what I love, and I was still getting 4 hours of sleep, but I was loving it. And I was like, fuck it. This is, I love it. Yeah. And I still do, that's the thing, is I wouldn't do this if I didn't love it still. Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with fighting, because there's days like that I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
It's like that Bull Durham moment.
Yeah, exactly.
F this effing game.
Yeah, fuck this fucking game. Yeah, exactly. And I feel that way, well, trust me. But, that was and I feel like God put that on my heart and was like, you can do this thing. Yeah. You can do this. And he gave me the ability to be a great coach and a great leader and a good mentor and a good dad and husband and all those things. And, I'm not perfect at all. I fucked this up a lot, is the thing. And to trailblaze anything, you're going to screw up a lot. Yeah. And so, and I still do. I am not perfect. I still learn, but I'm willing to learn. That's the thing, is I'm willing to continue to evolve and learn. And I think that's why we've stayed in the mix as long as we have.
Yeah. I think it's one thing I've always admired about you is your ability to admit when you're wrong, or maybe a mistake was made, and then kind of pivot step into the right direction. Where I think sometimes the ego gets the best of us, right? And we just kind of stay the course knowing that it's wrong, but we don't want to admit that. And I've always, it's why we've all been so easily led by you. You know,
Yeah.
we've always been there. One thing that always stuck out with me, Coach, early on, I never forget when we first started working together, which to me was a big, personally, and for our agency, it was a big game changer for me, is when we fostered that relationship with you and your gym.
In Boise, remember?
Yes.
Went to dinner. Lunch or dinner?
Dinner. We had tacos.
That's right. Went to dinner.
But you said, Jason, I'll never forget, you said, Jason, I want to make not just champions in the cage, I want to make champions in life. And I feel like that always stuck with me, because I felt like you were really here to better these young men and women's lives for the better outside of the cage. And I just think that's something that we don't really discuss much in our business, but I think that's really the end game, the true end game, right, is winning in life, not just, I mean, you want wins in the cages, but winning in life is probably the key to making sure this wasn't all in vain, I guess.
Yeah, I have to constantly tell myself that too, because and I mean it. That's the thing, is I've said, that's been my statement from the jump.
Yeah.
Is I want to build first champions in life, and second champions in the cage. Because if the life thing is screwed up, you're going to have this real peak and valley in the cage.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have the ripple effect. Okay, we lose, it's a small ripple. We win, it's a small ripple.
Yeah.
Not this massive peak and valley thing. And so I still mean that today. Is my first job is to forge champions in life. That's my first job. I feel like that's we share fighting as the instrument in sharing in spending life together. Mm-hmm. But I feel like my mentorship starts with the let's forge amazing men and women. Yeah. And we're using fighting as the vehicle to do that. Yeah. And it's important to me to go win a fight. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, we know you're a sore loser, Coach.
I'm a fucking terrible loser.
Trust me, we know. I've been in some hotel rooms with you.
Everyone steers clear of me for days. And I try to get better at that, because I'm like, man, that's not the end all be all. It is, though. It is, but it's not. And so I always have this constant inner struggle with that thing, where I think that statement is for myself too, is to remind myself that this is more than just fighting. Yeah. I think Deion Sanders said it best recently. You know, he recently just said, this isn't just about wins and losses. You know, and it's funny because, you know, he's got an X on his back right now. Everyone wants to beat Deion Sanders. Yeah. Prime. They want to go beat Prime. You know, like he said, I'm not playing anymore. Why do you care about beating me? Go beat these kids. You know, the point is, though, is that it is about, like, we have to be able to win more than we lose. That's the thing. And you're not successful, I guess, if you're not winning. And like right now, man, we're on a streak where we're getting our asses kicked. And 5 years ago, that would have been really, I wouldn't have said that out loud, because I just wouldn't have the confidence to know that I could turn it around. We could turn it around. But I know we'll turn it around. It's just the ebb and flow of fighting. Like, it's just what it is. Like MMA, the reason MMA is so exciting to watch is it's so unpredictable. Yeah. Who predicted Bobby Green doing what he did against Grant Dawson Saturday night? Could Bobby win the fight? Yes, but no one predicted that was going to happen in 30 seconds. There's no way. That's why MMA is so fun to watch. It's like, it's so unpredictable. And then I've put myself in this unpredictable spot where I'm like, okay, sign of the cross. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. You know? And so even though we've prepared our asses off to do it, what I know, though, is I know that the relationships I've forged over the years, the kids that aren't fighting anymore, that still reach out to me and say, Coach, the stuff you taught me about life and fighting, I still use in business and in my relationships, in my marriage, as a dad, you know, all these things. Sometimes you get jaded to hearing that, because I've heard it so often. Yeah. And it's almost sad to even say that out loud. Yeah. Like, oh, that's just the norm. You know,
but it should be, though, right?
It should be. Yeah. And my wife says, you know, very few people get the text messages and the calls that you get on a regular basis to say you changed their life. Who gets those phone calls? Who gets those text messages? Normal people, you know, quote unquote, normal people don't get those a lot. Yeah. I get those constantly, and sometimes I'm jaded to it, because I'm like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, that's what they should be saying, even though it's more special than that. And but that's the whole point is let's go forge champions in life first, and then the champion in the cage thing will happen. And they're not going to all become champions. That's the other thing I've had to come to realize over time, is that they're not going to all become actual champions in the cage. There's a select few that will, and a good majority of them won't, but it doesn't mean that they're not champions in the cage. It's just the actual belt on their waist doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But the belt in life does. And when I see them, my true measure of a success as a coach is not my wins and losses in the cage. It's when I see Josh Cavan with his family just recently at my buddy's place, and he's got 2 amazing kids.
His kids are adorable.
Yeah, and they're killing it, and his wife is killing it.
Yeah.
They're killing it. They're still together. They look like they're happy, not that they don't have their struggles. But when I watch him and I see him and I saw him and I saw the joy in his face and my face to see each other again, meet his kids and see his wife again, see Corey again, and be like, that's the true measure of me as a coach.
Yeah.
Right there. And that's the real story. The hand raised or not in the cage is a moment. And I have to constantly remind myself of that because, like you said, I'm a shitty loser. I'm not a good loser.
I love it about you, though.
I'm such a competitive person. I freaking hate it.
Yeah.
And so, which is part of what's made all of us great, is we're not good losers and we don't like it.
I feel like that's kind of one of the biggest struggles in life is what makes you great is kind of being that Viking, right? You conquer one land and you're trying to go to the next. But at that same token, you're balancing being present and having gratitude and enjoying what you just accomplished. And I feel like in our sport, it's very tough, right? You win a fight, they put the mic in front of you and they say, who do you want to fight next? They asked Bobby that, and Bobby last night, and Bobby said, I want to fight. I don't really want to call anyone out tonight. I'd like to fight in December. If I could choose the date, that would be better, right? Mm-hmm. But I just feel like, you never really, get a chance to enjoy the moment, I think, sometimes. And I feel like one thing I've appreciated with you is I feel like you really help the guys celebrate their wins. And I think that's something that I've kind of learned from you, is always to celebrate a win.
Yep.
So
hard.
With Katiquez or Pedro, some of these guys I've seen, like, where they're not quite present with it. And you're like, dude, you just won a UFC fight. Like,
right.
I think it was Uruguay that we were in that I remember you had this talk with Katiquez backstage, and I just really appreciate that, because I think sometimes you're right. Like we win and we're on to the next one, right? Like, what's next? Who are we going to, and it's like, man, let's just. And on the flip side, like Lance and I were talking about this, I think we went 0-5, 0-6, one card, like I think the end of last year. And I was like, Coach, I was a wreck, right? And I'm probably ruining time with my wife. And Lisa said, dude, 5 years ago, you didn't even have 5 guys in the UFC. You know what I mean? It's like perspective, right?
Mama
like
gives you perspective all the time.
And you're just, but I've always looked up to you and how you've made sure the guys enjoy those moments, because they just happen so fast, right?
Yes.
I always think of when, you were battling cancer last year, and how much at the time of Gutierrez's fight, I'll call him Gutierrez, people know what I'm talking about, not Katiquez, against Frank Edgar and MSG, you really hadn't had. You had that procedure? No, you had not, right?
No,
so
I had the knee surgery.
Knee surgery, but it was a lot of uncertainty.
Tons.
And I just remember how selfless you were, just being there in his moment, making it about him, even though there was a lot of eyes on you and the uphill battle that you were going to have to face. And what a beautiful moment, right? All the stuff that Chris Gutierrez has been through in his life, and then to get a win in MSG, which to me is like the holy grail of arenas. I don't know, it's just such a special moment, and it's one of my favorite moments that I've had with you, and especially with Gutierrez, because we've had a lot of history with him.
Yeah, we had to raise that kid. That memory will forever be etched in my mind till the day I die, because the journey with Chris has been a fun one, but it's been a tough one too.
Yeah.
He's had some stuff. Talk about forging a champion in life.
And that's why I brought it reminded me of him when you said that right now. Yeah,
because he, when he first came to us from Texas, man, the mayhem he had going on in life was crazy. Yeah. And he's a great kid, but he's a knucklehead too. And they all are, but he's a knucklehead in his own way. And it's like, man, this is going to be an uphill battle, Jay. I was like, this one's going to be a tough one. And to his credit, he's really taken to everything, and look at where it's put him. And it's interesting the timing of me getting diagnosed with cancer and his fight.
Yeah.
Because I remember when they put me in the hospital and didn't know I had cancer yet, and they just, I had the bad staph infection, and when they ended up telling me I had cancer, it just happened to find it because of my, doing an ultrasound on my kidneys.
Yeah.
Found I had cancer in my kidney and that whole story. I remember when I got admitted in the hospital and they told me I'm not going home, the first thing I told them is I have a fight in a week in MSG, because it was on a Friday night.
Yeah.
And then the next weekend, the next Friday I was supposed to leave. I said, I have a fight in MSG that I'm not missing. And I didn't even know I had cancer then. I just knew that they were keeping me overnight. And I told my wife, I'm going on that flight. And she's like, you're not going anywhere. Calm down. The doctor was like, you're not going anywhere. Just relax. And I said to them all, I don't give a fuck what you say. I'm getting on the plane, okay? So whatever I have to do leading up to this point, you let me know.
You postponed surgery, I believe, right?
No, I had surgery. That's why I had to walk with the cane.
Okay. So you were able to do it, but you left early, right?
Left early. I was supposed to stay in the hospital. I was supposed to stay home.
That's what it was. Okay.
So what happened is the people that don't know the cancer story, I'll just make it quick because it's kind of a long story. But I got stung by a bee. It was a Sunday. I was shooting my bow, getting ready to go hunt grizzly bear with my bow in Alaska with my dad and my brother. Got stung by a bee in my thigh. I went the next day on Monday to train like I always do with the guys and coach and everything. I ended up training. I've never had staph in my whole entire mixed martial arts career for 25 years. I get an infection in my leg. The reason the bee sting is important is because the opening, the tiny little microscopic opening where the sting went in is where essentially how the staph made its way in.
I don't think I even know it's part of the story. Wow.
Yeah, so that's how it started. That's how the staph started. This is from that.
I just thought it was from the dirty guys in the gyms.
Well, it could be that too, right? So that's the bee sting is where the staph essentially starts. And so the infection happens. I battle this infection for a month, off and on. I actually go hunting in Alaska with an infection. I do all this thing. It's actually getting better. They put me on antibiotics multiple times. I went back and forth to the doctor before I left to Alaska. The first antibiotic wasn't working. The second one was working, so I was able to go on the trip. I come back. This thing's starting to flare back up again. I go back in. They're like, okay, this is a problem. Then I on this Friday I'm talking about, I go to sparring on Friday morning and I can't even stand up. I'm sitting down in a chair because I'm in such bad shape. And I'm dehydrated and I'm wrecked and my leg's swollen. My pants are like stuck to my leg because my leg's so swollen. I can't get my foot in my shoe. Like everything is a problem. My wife's like, you need to go to the doctor. I'm like, I'm going to sparring first. She's like, you need to go to the doctor. And I'm like, well, come with me to sparring and go there first. She's like, you're such an idiot. And so I go to sparring. I'm sitting down literally like I am right now, and I'm coaching at the cage. I never do that. I always stand up and whatever. So she's like, okay, you're done with sparring. We're going to the ER right now. And so we go to ER, and then when we get to the ER room, it was so packed and busy that they couldn't help us right away. So I'm just sitting there in major pain because my leg feels like it's going to blow off. It's like in so much, it's so inflamed. Once the nurse comes and finally sees me in the waiting room, she looks at my leg and my foot, and she's like, oh, my God. She goes, we're putting you on an IV right now in the waiting room, and you're not going home. And I was like, what are you talking about, not going home right now? Why not?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're in bad shape. So what I didn't know is I came in with the beginning stages of kidney failure because I was dehydrated and been fighting an infection for a month. And that's why they ultrasound my kidney. And so
that's how they found the cancer.
And that's how they found it, because I didn't go in there feeling any symptoms of having kidney cancer. I went in there because I had a staph infection.
So when they did the procedure before Katikas' fight, that was on your leg or that was the actual kidney?
So they what they did is they said, we're going to have to do surgery on your leg to clean out that staph infection, because that's not going away with just an oral antibiotic.
Yeah.
And so they had to go in and lance open my leg and flush out my entire leg and do that whole thing. And that's how bad it was, and that's how bad it was getting. And so luckily I was there in time. But after the surgery on the staph, the next day, this doctor came in that I'd never met before, and my 2 kids and my wife were there in the room, and she said, Mark, I need to talk to you. Are you okay with your family being here? And I just got out of surgery like the day before, so I was a little out of it still. But I was thinking, why does she care if my family's here? We're talking about staph. What does it matter? I was like, of course, no problem. And she goes, well, when we did I need to let you know, when we did the ultrasound of your kidneys, you were in the beginning stages of kidney failure. Of course, we've put you on so many IVs and antibiotics that your kidneys are recovering and are going to be fine. However, in your right kidney, there looks like there's what appears to be a cancerous mass. And I was like, wait, what did she say? And she goes, yeah, it looks like there's what appears to be cancerous mass in your right kidney. And the reason I say that is because the masses that are benign typically don't have blood flow to them. And that mass in your kidney has blood flow to it. She goes, we don't know until we get it out. And of course, now liability speaking. Like, we don't know until we get it out and do a biopsy and the whole thing. But, excuse me, I'm looking at her going, hold on a second. And I'm not hearing anything she's saying, really. I'm just kind of seeing it like in the Charlie Brown. I'm like, did she just say I have cancer, And I said, wait, did you say I have cancer? She's like, we don't know yet. I was like, don't bullshit me. Like, do you think I have cancer? And she goes, it's a high probability you have cancer. And I was like, so I have cancer.
Just say it.
Just frickin' say it, So in my head, I'm like, I have cancer. And so that's on like a Wednesday. And I'm booked to get on a flight on Friday to go to MSG. Yeah. And so I said, okay, well, what do I need to do? I said, are we going to get this cancer out? Like, let's get it out. She goes, well, we can't. We need to let you sit for about a month-ish because one of the major risks in any surgery is an infection, and you have one right now. So to go try to do a surgery on top of you having a major infection is not a good idea.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, what does this mean? She's like, and I have this wound vac thing hooked to my leg, by the way. And this thing is like this big machine on the ground, this tube that goes into your leg, and it's pulling out. It's trying to help the wound heal fast, but it's freaking intense. Like, it hurts, okay? And it's hooked to my leg, and I can't go anywhere. It's like a ball and chain on you. Like, you can't go to the bathroom, you can't get up without moving it. So I named it Caruso, after our coach, Randy Caruso. Because I was like, this thing's just like a pain in my ass like Randy Caruso. So I was like, all right, Caruso, we're going to the bathroom. Let's go, buddy. And I would pick up this wound vac thing, and I'd go to the bathroom. So I was like, when do I get Caruso off my leg? She's like, well, tomorrow morning you should be able to get that off. I said, okay, cool. I hadn't walked yet. I'm like, can I walk? And she's like, you're not going to be able to walk without assistance. You're going to need a cane, crutches, or a walker. Yeah. And I was thinking in my head, like, I'm going to MSG. There's no fucking way I'm taking a walker down, and I'm not taking crutches. So I looked at my wife and I go, babe, can you get online and find a dope-ass cane? Because that's what I'm taking to MSG. She's like, you're not going, you're getting on a plane? And I was like, yeah, I'm getting on a plane. And the doc's like, look, there's a major risk of you getting on the plane because you're going to need to take blood thinners, and we don't want you to have a blood clot and all these things from just having surgery and all this stuff. You're going to need to take, some major blood thinners. You're going to need to get up every 30 minutes on this flight. You're going to need to walk. I said, done. I can do all that stuff. And my wife hates traveling, Yeah. So I looked at her and I said, listen, I'm going one way or another. And the doctor's like, she's like, will you tell him not to go? He was like, no one really wanted me to go, but I didn't care. I was like, I'm going. And I told my wife, I said, look, if I'm going to die from cancer, I'm not dying sitting here miserable thinking about cancer. I'm going to go live my life. And if I die, I die. Yeah. Like it's just, I have peace with it. And I really, truly meant that. And I didn't know at the time, like, how much I was or wasn't. Like, who knows? You know, you just told me I have cancer.
You wouldn't know until they got in and really figured out what was going on, right?
Right. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going. And so I said, give me the blood thinners. I'll get up every 30 minutes. I said to my wife, I said, listen, if you want to go with me, come travel with me. I could use your help. Because I wasn't mobile hardly at all. I was walking with a freaking cane, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, and so she's like, fine. And so she came and flew with me.
Yeah.
And we showed up on Friday night. And Chris came and saw me on Monday before he left, because they leave on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
Came and saw me. He's like, Coach, love you, man. You don't need to be there. And I was like, Chris, I'll be at your fight. Just know I'll be there. And when I showed up, you could just see the light in his eyes, like, holy shit, Coach is here. And I remember him and Jonathan were in the workout room when we walked in, coming off the flight, and I had a cane, man. I was walking with a cane, and I could just tell, like, there's no way we're losing this fight.
Yeah.
Like, you could just tell. Like, there's just too much going on right now there's no way we're losing this fight. And that's when he fought Frankie Edgar and caught him with that knee early at MSG. And but yeah, after that, that's a month after, right before Christmas, I had my kidney removed, fully removed, and then they tested it and it ended up being cancer. So,
and you've been right. They just did I think Jared posted something the other day, right? You've been cancer free. They did the checkup.
Yeah. So I had to do some CT scans and stuff. They say it takes 2 years fully to be like out of the woods. It takes 5 to be fully out of the woods of being cancer free. But the first 2 years are the most crucial. And we're almost to the year mark come December of having, my kidney out and the cancer out. And so my CT scan came back good. Most things are good. So there's some levels that have been off. It's been a tough physical year for me. It's it's probably the toughest physical year I've ever had.
Yeah.
The surgery was terrible. The losing a major organ is, I can't even explain how hard it is.
Yeah, your body's adapting and adjusting to functioning without a kidney, which is insane.
And I train like a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And my expectations mentally are I want to do that. And my body is like, you're not doing that right now.
Yeah.
And so that part has been really tough. It's been a tough struggle for me. Just physically, it's been a tough struggle for me this year. But it's coming back. It's still not fully back, but it's coming back. And, I've had to look at myself in the mirror and be like, this is my new norm. Because I'm like, fuck that. This is not my new norm. I'm not doing this. I will figure this out. And it might kill me, but I'm going to figure it out because I want to get back to quote unquote normal,
Yeah.
And so, but like the doc said, you're not even a year into this thing, and you're in such great shape. And
let's say you've maintained your shape. I mean, we couldn't tell a difference, from the outside.
I could tell, man.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate that. It's just been rough,
Yeah.
And so, but I'm not. There's people that have had a way tougher journey than me. So, but this is mine, And so, what's cool, man, is the UFC recently reached out to me.
I saw that.
And ESPN.
Heck yeah.
And they're gonna do a story about my whole cancer thing. And the reason I'm really excited about that is just to create awareness and create hope, and to tell we might be down but we're not out story.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that, Jay, is when I was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't have fear ever. Mm-hmm. Never had fear.
I remember. I think I was more. I think you were strong as a rock, man. I know Katikas called me and he was shook. I was shook. Yeah. You were pretty I'm going to see you this week, and I was like, crazy. Okay.
Yeah. I never had fear. I had a lot of peace, and I feel like I had peace because, and I still do, because I'm not perfect, but I feel like when I am with people, I'm always present.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've given my all to everyone I can give. And I'm not a quantity dad. I'm not a quantity husband. I'm a quality husband and dad.
And that was one of the questions I really wanted to touch on today. Is I've always respected how you've been able to, I guess call you a father figure to a lot of your athletes, right? But then at the same time, be a father to your kids as well. I've always thought like that. I just admire you, how you've done that. I've always wanted to ask how you do that, or what principles you've set to do that. I mean, Wyatt and Brooklyn, I mean, they adore you. They love you to death. You guys have a great relationship with them, but then you've also had such a meaningful impact in your athletes as well. I just, it's so hard to do, I feel like, because you've been, you know, you're at everyone's fights, but then you're also there for all your kids, you know, important moments or.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, like this weekend is a good example. You know, I'm here in Vegas. Wyatt, he's a sophomore in high school. He went to homecoming. I missed homecoming. My daughter Brooklyn just moved out of our house and moved into her brand new apartment this weekend. I missed so many things, Jay. Like, I've missed every major thing you could think of. I've missed anniversaries, I've missed holidays, I've missed birthdays, anything that's significant, I've missed. But the blessing of that is my wife hasn't. And we've been able to structure it to where my wife has been at everything. She's never missed the kids anything, you know? And so one of the things that I struggled with, especially at the beginning of this whole journey of owning a business and running FactoryX and being a coach and being on the road, I didn't know I'd be on the road as much as I am. I never knew that.
This thing just took off 2014, 15. So it just got crazy. I remember that time. Yeah.
And I never knew I'd be on the road 40 plus weeks a year. I didn't know that. And nor did anybody else. And so we had to figure this thing out on the fly. And I would tell my wife, like, I feel really bad that I'm missing my kid's game or birthday or our anniversary or whatever. And she said something to me that I'll never forget. Number one, your kids don't know a different life. This is the only life your kids know. So you're basing your thoughts on what you think potentially your kids know, but your kids don't know a different life. They just
know what they know now.
What they're growing up with is normal to them.
Yeah.
You're in your head going, this isn't normal. And maybe that's true, but in their life, this is normal. Dad goes on the road, this is what he does. And she's like, you know, you just need to have quality time with them. You're not going to be a quantity guy with them. So if you come home off your trips and you get on your phone or watch TV or go drink or whatever people do, and there's no quality time with us, then it'll fall. It'll fail. The wall will fall. And so, you know, I took that to heart. And the other thing is my wife.
When you get home, bringing the energy, bringing that presence, and just, you know, not getting on social media, not putting on Yellowstone or something, like just getting right to it. And okay.
Like my kids, especially when they were younger, you know, my kids they were young, you know, and I'd be like, man, maybe they'll want to watch a movie and we could fall asleep because I've had 3 hours of sleep coming from these fights, you know.
Yeah.
And no, they'd want to go play. And I'd be like, man, I don't have an ounce of energy right now to play, but I got to figure this out. And, you know, get off the phone, get off the TV, and we go play. We'd do stuff. We'd go to the park or things I didn't really want to do, to be completely honest with you. But I would go do because that was the sacrifice of
And those are probably the things that they remember the most.
They remember. You know, my kids remember. You know what they remember the most? Or one of the things they remember the most is on Tuesday mornings, we go to breakfast.
Yes.
I take my kids to breakfast every Tuesday morning. You're talking spending 45 minutes together with them, okay? And I would let them play whatever song they wanted to play. They'd pick a song.
Yeah.
And on the way to school, they'd get to pick a song. And then when I drop one off, you know, the other one would pick their song. And that was their little, like, Tuesday little thing. And we go to breakfast and we'd do that. And we just sit there, and sometimes it'd be significant stuff, sometimes it'd be nothing, and we would just, you know, chop it up. But the quality time together, the quality, not the quantity, because I don't have a quantity in me. I'm not a quantity dad. And so and same with my wife. Like, you know, every Wednesday night we go and there's not a Wednesday night we don't go and have a dinner or date night together.
Yeah.
And we constantly have done that and made that a tradition so I can go give some quality time. And is it enough? I don't know. But the point is it's quality. And so, and my kids have grown up to understand this, and a lot of credit to my wife, because some women will be like, your dad's always gone, and they run that narrative, and then the kids start hearing that.
She's ran the narrative.
Like, your dad is out.
Yeah.
Yes, your dad is out taking care of us and others,
Changing lives.
And right. And so, be proud of that, and instead of making it a negative. And Jara said something to me that is very profound. She said this early on. She said, Mark, I've realized that God didn't make you just for us. He's made you for a lot of other people. And we have to accept that because you're not just for us.
I love that.
And I was like, wow. For her to have that kind of perspective and support and faith is massive, because it gives me peace to go and do my job.
Allows you to have joy when you're out there doing it. You're not worried about,
right.
You have that support at home.
Right. And I always, it pains me not to be at homecoming this weekend.
Yeah.
It pains me not to see my daughter move into her first apartment. It pains me, but it also gives me I still have joy being here with my athletes. I still have joy being here, having a conversation with you, because I can, this is where I'm supposed to be present right now. Yeah. And I always use that phrase, be present where your feet are.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting at a dinner table with you and you're on your phone, I would rather just go have dinner on my own, because I want to let's be present together. Let's have a bonding moment. Let's have conversation.
Yeah.
Let's
you said, even if it's just 40 minutes, it's still priceless, right?
It's priceless. And just go be present with your feet, where your feet are. It's one of the reasons why sometimes people ask me, a lot of times fans, they ask, how come you don't get on social media the night that you guys fight and post stuff? Because I'm present with my athlete, win or lose. I'm present with my thoughts. I'm present with them. To be honest with you, I'm present with them, especially in loss. And
you're not over here making sure social media knows you won or lost or whatever it may be.
And that's the thing too, Jay, is I don't shy away from the fact that we lost.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people shy away from that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy false narrative. Like, not all the people you're around are winning, fucker. That's not true. And I hate that. It's because you're only posting the wins. That's not, fuck that. Yeah. And so where they need you the most, where they need the support the most, is when they're losing.
Yeah.
When life's kicking them in their ass. That's where they need need your, like, hey man, I love you and we got this thing.
Yeah.
And so and I don't get on there the night of, because it's not important to me that you know what's going on. What's important to me is that my athlete in front of me feels the presence and feels the guidance and the mentorship and the attaboys when you did great, and man, we can still conquer this thing when you didn't.
And I've always admired that about you. That I feel like your fighters know, like, when they have joy, you have joy, and when they have those moments of heartbreak, you're there with them. And I think that really goes a long way. And I think that's why they're so loyal to you, because, we've seen it before. Some coaches, their guy loses and they're out gallivanting around like it was like nothing happened, And I've always felt like you're in those trenches with your guys. I've always really respected that about you.
And I think that comes from just how we get to the fight.
Yeah.
I'm in the trenches with them every day.
So it makes no difference on that night.
The night is just the night. It was, the Zig Ziglar said that quote, and I always relate it to fighting, but fighting's an event, not your identity.
Yeah, I love that.
It's just an event.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a freaking event.
It's what we do. It's not who we are.
Yeah, your identity. And it's hard not to get caught up in that, because that's your ego. I do it. That's why I'm such a shitty loser, because my ego is massive, and I hate it.
Yeah. And
I want to find joy and peace in winning.
Yeah.
But it's not where it always is, and so that's the. It's a tough balance, man. I don't do it perfectly at all. There's a lot of great coaches out there that are killing it, and they have different ways, but that's the way I've done it.
No, I think it's tough for everyone. I think you nailed it on the head. It's a constant battle. Right?
It is.
I mean, it's what makes you great, though, at the same time. Like, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's like fire, right? You get too much, it burns down the house. Just enough, it warms the house. I mean, I think that's kind of what we have to deal with every Saturday, and keeping that in check.
Yeah. And stay humble and hungry is something that I think is important.
Yeah.
Don't let the good go to your head, and don't let the bad go to your head, but stay hungry as fuck either way.
Yeah.
And so, my athletes and my coaches and my support staff and you guys, you know, those have been the cornerstones of how we've been successful.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's and ultimately my faith. That's something that's been a massive part of me, and it's something that I really struggled with at the beginning when I was a coach, because I was like, man, I know I have this faith base, and it says in the Bible to be a fisher of men and women, and I've really taken that to heart, and I don't push faith or religion on anybody. But the point is I just try to live a good life and be an example and a mentor, and then people will follow that.
Yeah.
And to be a leader is hard because you're the tip of the spear, feel everything.
Yeah.
But you also have to be courageous in your beliefs, and so. I don't shy away from the fact that I'm a faithful person and that I believe in God, and that the reason I'm here is ultimately and in this position is ultimately because that's the vision and that's who He created me to be. He didn't create me to be, I guess, a fighter only. He created me to be a coach, and that kind of comes full circle from the conversation. It's just. I never understood that. There's still days where I'm like, man, I feel like I could have done a lot of cool shit in the UFC cage as a fighter, and God didn't create me for that. I guess He created me to be a mentor and a coach and a leader and you know, a father and a husband and a friend and all those things. And so, you know, I'm proud of what we've done up to this point, but I'm not satisfied at all. We have so many things to do still, and
we're going to do them.
I know.
We're going to get our first belt together.
We are. We're going to get our first belt in December, and that's a cool thing. You know, the Brandon story is such a cool story. You know, I've trained him since he was 15 years old. He was riding his bicycle to the gym.
Yeah,
didn't even have a license yet, and so we spent 15 years together getting to this point. And in December, we got to go make that thing a reality. And the cool part about that is Brandon's already a fucking champion.
Yeah.
Like if you know Brandon Royval, kid's already a champion.
Class act.
He's a class act.
Everything he does.
He is a great example.
I've always admired all the gratitude that he has towards everyone. He's always been super grateful for everything. I really admire his humbleness. Despite all of his success. And
he will continue to be that and just be a wolf, you know.
1,000%.
And he'll be an active champion. That's one thing about him.
Yeah,
is Brandon loves to fight. So you're gonna have your shit busy to be like, dude, and you're gonna have to, you know, because he'll want to fight and fight. So, but yeah, you know, we've won a ton of world titles. Throughout MMA and kickboxing, but the one that's eluded us at FactoryX up to this point has been the UFC belt, and so
December 16th,
we're going to go grab one of those, and I can't wait for that, you know.
No, I can't wait for it either. It's going to be good. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's fun.
Coach, I really thank you for coming on today. I just want to do a quick 3 rapid fire on you. Busiest freeway in Denver, billboard, you can put anything on there. What do you write?
Busiest,
any quote you want on a billboard for the people to see, what would it be?
Any quote? Well, first I would say enjoy the journey. That would be the first one. I think it would be like kind of like, you know, when you go to Wyoming and they have multiples, and then you read the first one, you're like, well, that didn't end, you know. Enjoy the journey. Like the journey is the thing, man. To win the belt, you're going to be unsatisfied if you focus solely on the belt.
But just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, and it's so cliche, but man, as I get older, it's so true. Like you have to frickin' enjoy the journey. And be present where your feet are is another thing that I think is massive. And frickin' smile, man. Because those 3 things, like, if you can embrace those 3 things, if you can enjoy the journey and be present
where your feet are,
and just smile.
That would be a good billboard.
Yeah, because you hit the 3, boom, 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 and you'd be like, oh, this makes my day, you know. And I think those, like, off the cuff, those would be the 3 like that are at the forefront of my mind. That would be
love that.
That'd be what it is. Yeah.
What would you tell your 21-year-old self?
To slow down. Yeah. You want everything right then and there, and life's experience is part of how you become who you become, and how success happens. Is just pump the brakes, dog.
Love that. Yeah.
And be motivated, but just
Slow down.
slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down. Enjoy it. Enjoy it.
And then my last one is one song on your playlist, rest of your life. What is it?
Holding My Own by Eric Church.
Love it.
Yeah, if you go listen to that song, that's a song you should probably play when I die, because "Holding My Own" is a great song. If you go listen to that song, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Hell yeah.
By him, yeah, and he's a great artist.
Okay.
So, yeah, that one's easy.
Well, Coach, I appreciate this. Thank you so much. To all my listeners, please check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. And thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Roobet, for supporting this podcast and for everything you do for our agency.